The whispers followed Penelope Shaw like a shadow, each hushed comment piercing deeper than any bullet could. It was 1878 in Willow Creek, Montana territory, where a woman's worth was measured by her sociability, her ability to engage in endless chatter at quilting circles and church socials. But Penelope's words came slowly, if at all, her thoughts often locked behind lips that refused to part without good reason. "That Shaw girl, strange as they come," Mrs. Peterson muttered as Penelope passed the general store, her arms laden with supplies for her father's small homestead on the outskirts of town. "Never says more than 2 words together. Gives me the shivers." Penelope kept her eyes fixed on the dusty road ahead, pretending not to hear. At 22, she had grown accustomed to the sidelong glances, the abrupt silences when she entered a room, the way mothers pulled their children closer when she walked by. In a town that thrived on gossip and conversation, her quietness was an unforgivable sin. The basket she carried grew heavier with each step, much like the burden of loneliness she'd borne since her mother's death 3 years prior. She and her father managed their small ranch together, but he was growing older, his hands no longer steady enough for the demands of their modest cattle operation. "Miss Shaw," the postmaster waved from his doorway. "Letter came for your pa." Penelope nodded, accepting the envelope with a small smile of thanks that didn't reach her eyes. The postmaster waited expectantly for a verbal response, then shook his head when none came. "Would it kill you to say thank you like normal folk?" he grumbled. The word stung, but Penelope had learned long ago that explaining herself only invited more ridicule. How could she make them understand that words felt wrong in her mouth sometimes, heavy and awkward like ill-fitting clothes? That her thoughts flowed in quiet streams rather than bubbling brooks? That speaking when she had nothing of value to say seemed dishonest somehow. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she made her final stop at the livery to arrange for feed delivery. The new blacksmith's apprentice approached with a grin that faltered when she merely pointed to their usual order written in her small notebook. "Cat got your tongue, pretty lady?" he asked, his initial friendliness souring to mockery. Penelope turned away, clutching her purchases tighter. The journey home would be long, but the solitude of the trail offered blessed relief from the constant judgment of town. She was halfway down the main street when the commotion began. A group of cowboys rode in, trail dust coating their clothes, the distinctive jingle of spurs announcing their arrival before they were fully visible. Penelope pressed herself against the boardwalk, hoping to remain unnoticed as the riders dismounted in front of the saloon. One of the men broke away from the group, leading his horse toward the water trough near where she stood. He was tall, broad-shouldered beneath a faded blue shirt, his face shadowed by a well-worn Stetson. When he looked up, Penelope caught her breath at eyes the color of summer sky, crinkled at the corners from years squinting against the sun. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice deep and unhurried as a slow-moving river. Penelope nodded acknowledgement, then turned to continue her journey, uncomfortable under his steady gaze. "Might I help you with those packages?" he called after her. "They look mighty heavy for one person to manage." She hesitated, surprised by the offer. No one in Willow Creek had offered her assistance in longer than she could remember. Slowly, she shook her head, gesturing toward the road leading out of town. "You're headed out alone." Concern creased his weathered face. "Storms brewing to the west, might catch you if you're going far." Penelope glanced at the horizon where dark clouds gathered like bruises against the sky. She hadn't noticed them before. Too focused on enduring the town's scrutiny, the stranger approached, keeping a respectful distance. "Name's Henry Oakley. Just signed on with the Lazy R Ranch. If you're headed that direction, I'd be honored to ride alongside. Safety in numbers, especially with weather turning." Penelope bit her lip, weighing her options. Her father would worry if she were caught in a storm, and this man's eyes held no mockery, only genuine concern. After a long moment, she nodded. Relief washed over Henry's face. Let me see to my horse and we'll get your things secured." He returned moments later, leading a handsome chestnut gelding. "This here's Rusty, most even-tempered horse I've ever had the pleasure of riding." As Henry helped secure her packages to her mare's saddle, the whispers started again. "Would you look at that? The mute's found herself a cowboy," someone said loudly enough to carry. "Poor fella doesn't know what he's getting into," another replied with a laugh. "Won't get 2 words out of her if he tries all day." Henry's hands stilled, his expression hardening as he glanced toward the voices. Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks as she mounted her horse, wishing the ground would open and swallow her whole. They rode in silence until Willow Creek was no more than a speck behind them. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain, and distant thunder rumbled across the plains. "Folks in town aren't much on manners, are they?" Henry finally said, adjusting his hat against the strengthening wind. Penelope kept her eyes on the trail, embarrassed that he had witnessed her humiliation. "I don't put much stock in idle talk myself," he continued when she didn't respond. "My pa always said a man's character shows in his actions, not his words." He paused, looking sidelong at her. "Reckon the same goes for a lady." The first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly turning from sprinkle to downpour. Henry pointed to a stand of cottonwoods along a creek bed. "We'd best take shelter until this passes." They rode hard for the trees, the rain soaking them through before they reached cover. Henry quickly set about making a small camp, unrolling oilskins from his saddlebag to create a makeshift shelter. Penelope helped as best she could, grateful for the task that required no speech. Once settled beneath the crude lean-to, watching sheets of rain transform the landscape, Henry pulled jerky and hardtack from his provisions. "Not fancy, but it'll keep body and soul together," he said, offering her a share. Penelope accepted with a nod, their fingers brushing momentarily. His weren't smooth like a townsman's, but calloused from honest work like her father's, like her own. "You know," Henry said between bites, "I've always found there's something peaceful about folks who don't feel the need to fill every silence." He gazed out at the rain-soaked prairie. Out on the trail, a man learns to appreciate quiet. It's the sound of peace, of being comfortable in your own skin. Penelope's head snapped up, startled by words that seemed to read her very thoughts. Henry smiled, the expression warming his features. "Did I say something strange?" "No," she whispered, the word feeling foreign on her tongue after so many silent hours. "No one's ever understood before." If Henry was surprised to hear her speak, he didn't show it. He simply nodded as if her words were the most natural thing in the world. "My sister Rose was the same way," he said, gazing into the distance. "Smartest person I ever knew, but words didn't come easy to her. Folks would mistake her silence for slowness, but they couldn't have been more wrong. She saw things others missed, felt things deeper." "What happened to her?" Penelope asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Henry's expression softened with remembrance. "Influenza 3 winters back, but she lived a good life, married a man who appreciated her quiet wisdom." He looked directly at Penelope. "There are people who understand the value of stillness, Miss Shaw," she supplied. "Penelope Shaw, Miss Shaw." He tipped his hat. "A pleasure to make your proper acquaintance." They fell into comfortable silence as the storm raged around them, the pounding rain gradually giving way to gentle patter. When the clouds finally broke, revealing late afternoon sun that turned the wet grasslands to gold, they packed up and continued their journey. "That's our place," Penelope said, pointing to a modest homestead nestled against a gentle rise. Smoke curled from the chimney, evidence that her father was home. As they approached, the door swung open and Thomas Shaw emerged, rifle in hand, his weathered face creased with worry. "Penelope." "Thank the Lord." He lowered the weapon when he recognized his daughter, though his eyes narrowed suspiciously at Henry. "This is Mr. Oakley, father," Penelope said, her voice stronger than usual. "He offered escort when the storm threatened." Thomas's eyebrows rose at his daughter's uncharacteristic introduction, but he extended his hand to the cowboy. Obliged for looking after my girl, Mr. Oakley. Any decent man would have done the same, Henry replied, dismounting. You have a fine daughter, sir. Thomas Shaw studied the stranger, then nodded. Come inside, both of you. Get dried by the fire while I see to the horses. The Shaw home was modest but well kept, evidence of Penelope's careful attention. Henry removed his hat, running a hand through damp hair as he took in the simple furnishings, the carefully mended curtains, the bookshelf heavy with volumes. Your readers, he observed, scanning the titles. Mother believed in education, Penelope said, moving to stoke the fire. Father indulges my habit. Nothing to indulge, Henry replied. Knowledge is never wasted. By the time Thomas returned, Penelope had coffee brewing and was cutting thick slices of bread to accompany the stew simmering on the stove. Mr. Oakley's with the lazy R, she told her father as they settled at the table. Frank Reynolds' outfit? Thomas nodded approvingly. He runs a respectable operation. You new to these parts, son? Just hired on last month, Henry confirmed. Came up from Texas with a herd. Long journey, Thomas remarked. Planning to stay? Henry's eyes flickered briefly to Penelope. I believe I might. Something about this country feels right. The conversation flowed easily through dinner, mostly between the men, though Henry made efforts to include Penelope without pressuring her to speak. When she did contribute, he listened with genuine interest, his attention never wavering even when her words came haltingly. I should head back, Henry said finally, noting the darkness that had fallen. Mr. Reynolds will be wondering where I've gotten to. Nonsense, Thomas declared. Roads'll be mud after that deluge. You're welcome to the barn for tonight. Head out at first light. Henry accepted the offer with thanks, and Penelope found herself inexplicably pleased by the prospect of his continued presence. Later, as she prepared to bring him extra blankets, she overheard her father's voice from the barn. My Penelope's different from other girls, Thomas was saying. Always has been. Her mother understood her, but since Martha passed, well, town folk haven't been kind. I noticed, Henry replied, his tone hardening. Seems to me they're missing out on knowing a remarkable woman. That she is, Thomas agreed, but I worry what'll become of her when I'm gone. This place is too much for one person, especially a woman alone. Sir, Henry said carefully, I hope you don't think me forward, but I'd like your permission to call on Miss Shaw properly. Penelope's breath caught in her throat. She clutched the blankets tighter, hardly daring to believe what she'd heard. You've only just met her, Thomas pointed out. Yes, sir. But I've known many people in my 30 years and few have impressed me as quickly as your daughter. I'd like the chance to know her better. Thomas was silent for a long moment. She doesn't give her trust easily if you're not serious in your intentions. I assure you, Mr. Shaw, I wouldn't speak of this if I weren't. Penelope retreated silently, her heart pounding. No man had ever expressed interest in courting her before. Most dismissed her after a single uncomfortable encounter, unwilling to invest effort in the strange Shaw girl. When she returned to the barn, both men fell silent, though Henry's eyes brightened at her appearance. Brought you some extra blankets, she said, holding them out. Nights get cold here, even in summer. Thank you, Miss Shaw. Their fingers brushed as he accepted them, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Your hospitality is much appreciated. Thomas cleared his throat. I'll head in, check those fence lines tomorrow. Good night to you both. After her father departed, Penelope stood awkwardly, uncertain what to say. The lantern light cast Henry's face in soft shadows, highlighting the strong line of his jaw. I hope you'll allow me to call on you properly, he said quietly. I'd like to know you better, Penelope Shaw. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it, raw and honest. Henry stepped closer, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Because in a world full of noise, you're a moment of peace, because you listen before you speak, and when you do speak, your words have meaning. His gaze held her steadily. Because from the moment I saw you, something told me you were someone worth knowing. Penelope looked down, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't name. The town will talk. Let them, Henry replied simply. Their words can only hurt us if we give them power. She looked up, searching his face for any sign of insincerity, finding none. "I would like that," she whispered. "Very much." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then I'll call on Sunday if that's agreeable." Penelope nodded, a small smile forming on her own lips. "Good night, Mr. Oakley." "Henry," he corrected gently. "Please call me Henry." "Good night, Henry," she amended, the sound of his name feeling right on her tongue. As promised, Henry appeared on Sunday, freshly shaved and wearing his best shirt, his horse groomed to a shine. He brought a small package wrapped in brown paper, a book of poetry she'd mentioned admiring, and asked if she'd accompany him for a ride. Under her father's watchful but approving eye, they set out across the rolling grasslands, Henry pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his travels. Penelope found herself speaking more than she had in years, her usual reserve melting in the warmth of his genuine interest. "I've never told anyone about that," she admitted after sharing a childhood memory. "About how I used to pretend the cottonwoods were whispering secrets when their leaves rustled." "I'm honored you told me," Henry replied, "and I think you might be right. Trees that old must have plenty of secrets to share." In the weeks that followed, Henry became a regular visitor at the Shaw homestead. He helped Thomas with repairs to the barn roof, brought supplies from town to spare Penelope the discomfort of going herself, and always treated her quietness as something to be respected rather than fixed. Word spread through Willow Creek about the cowboy courting the mute Shaw girl, as some still called her. Curiosity brought new faces to Sunday service, eager to witness this unlikely romance. "He must be desperate for land," Mrs. Peterson speculated loudly as Penelope and Henry passed the church steps, "or blind as a bat not to see how odd she is." Henry's jaw tightened, but Penelope squeezed his arm gently. "They don't matter," she whispered, echoing his own words back to him. The pride in his eyes at that moment was worth all the cruel whispers she'd endured over the years. As summer faded into autumn, their courtship deepened. Henry proved himself not just to Thomas, who increasingly relied on the younger man's strength for ranch work, but to Penelope herself, who found her heart opening like a flower long kept in darkness. One crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Henry took her hand. "I've been offered a permanent position at the Lazy R," he said. "Foreman with the use of a cabin on the property." Penelope's heart sank. The Lazy R was a good 20 miles away, too far for regular visits. "That's wonderful," she managed, trying to hide her disappointment. "You deserve recognition for your hard work." Henry turned to face her fully. "Penelope, I haven't accepted yet. There's something I need to ask you first." He slid from the bench to one knee, still holding her hand. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. I've found in you everything I never knew I was searching for." Penelope's free hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes as Henry continued. "I don't have much to offer except my heart and my hands, but both are yours if you'll have them." He reached into his pocket, producing a simple gold band. "Penelope Shaw, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" For a woman of few words, Penelope found herself with only one that mattered. "Yes," she breathed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, Henry." Their wedding took place in November, a small affair at the ranch with only Thomas, Reverend Adams, and a few of Henry's colleagues from the Lazy R in attendance. Conspicuously absent were the townspeople who had shunned Penelope for so long. "Are you sure you don't want to invite anyone else?" Henry had asked during the planning. "It's your special day." Penelope had shaken her head. "I only want people who truly care for us. The rest." They've made their feelings clear enough. As they exchanged vows, Penelope's voice rang clear and true, no hesitation in her promise to love and honor this man who had seen value in her silence. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Henry kissed her with such tenderness that even the most skeptical witness couldn't doubt the depth of his feelings. The cabin at the Lazy R was small but solid, with a view of the mountains that took Penelope's breath away. Henry had prepared it carefully, adding bookshelves for her collection and a rocking chair by the window where she could sit and observe the changing seasons. "It's perfect," she told him as they crossed the threshold together. "It feels like home already." Life as Mrs. Henry Oakley brought challenges Penelope hadn't anticipated. The other ranch wives, curious about the new foreman's quiet bride, invited her to gatherings where she struggled to participate in their flowing conversations. Some, like Mrs. Reynolds, the owner's wife, made genuine efforts to include her. Others whispered behind their hands when they thought she couldn't hear. "Don't know what Henry sees in her," one said during a quilting bee. "Pretty enough, I suppose, but strange as can be." "Hush now," Mrs. Reynolds had scolded. "That girl knows more about running a homestead than half of you combined, and have you seen how the children take to her?" It was true. The ranch children, unfettered by adult prejudices, had quickly warmed to Penelope's gentle nature. She began teaching the younger ones their letters while their mothers worked, her patience perfect for the task. Where others might have scolded a struggling child, Penelope simply sat quietly until they were ready to try again. "You have a gift with them," Henry observed one evening as they walked home from the main house, where Penelope had been helping Mrs. Reynolds prepare for Christmas festivities. "They don't expect me to be different," she replied. "They accept what I offer without demanding more." Henry squeezed her hand. "Like someone else I know." The first months of marriage were a delicate dance of adjustment, learning each other's rhythms, finding balance between togetherness and solitude. Henry understood Penelope's need for quiet reflection, never taking offense when she withdrew into herself. She, in turn, learned to recognize his need for conversation after long days working alongside men who communicated in grunts and nods. Their first Christmas as husband and wife brought a surprise visit from Thomas, who arrived bearing gifts and news from town. "Willow Creek's changing," he told them over dinner. "Railroads coming through next spring. Talk of a proper school, maybe even a library." "That's wonderful," Penelope said, genuinely pleased for the community despite her complicated feelings toward it. "Town council's looking for a teacher," Thomas continued, eyes twinkling. "Thought of you right away, Penny, all those books you've read the way you've taught yourself." Penelope nearly dropped her fork. "Me, but I'm—" She trailed off, uncertain how to articulate her limitations. "The most educated person within 50 miles, Henry finished firmly, "and a natural teacher from what I've seen with the children here. But the townspeople," Penelope began. "Are singing a different tune now," Thomas assured her. "Mrs. Peterson herself approached me after service, asked if you might consider the position. Seems your success has made them reconsider their judgment." Penelope looked to Henry, finding encouragement in his steady gaze. "I don't know if I can stand before a classroom," she admitted. "Speaking all day." "You speak when you have something worth saying," Henry reminded her. "Teaching is about more than words, it's about listening, observing, guiding, all things you excel at." That night, as they lay in bed discussing the unexpected opportunity, Penelope confessed her deepest fear. "What if I fail? What if the children laugh at me when words don't come?" Henry drew her closer. "Then you'll find another way to teach them, but I don't believe you'll fail, Penelope. You're stronger than you know." By spring, Penelope had accepted the position, committing to 3 days a week in the new schoolhouse being constructed on Willow Creek's expanding Main Street. The railroad's arrival brought new faces to the region, people without preconceived notions about the strange Shaw girl. Her first day of teaching tested every ounce of courage she possessed. Standing before 12 expectant faces, Penelope felt her throat tighten, words evaporating like morning dew. But then she remembered Henry's belief in her, his insistence that her quietness was strength, not weakness. "Good morning," she began softly. "I am Mrs. Oakley, and I believe learning happens best in moments of both sound and silence." By term's end, Penelope's class had the highest literacy rate the region had ever seen. Her unconventional methods encouraging observation, providing space for thought before speech, valuing quality of response over quantity, proved remarkably effective. "You've done wonders with these children," Reverend Adams told her at the end of term exhibition, where students proudly displayed their work. Particularly young William. His parents feared he would never read properly. Penelope smiled, watching the boy in question explaining his nature drawings to attentive adults. "William thinks deeply before he speaks. I simply gave him the time he needed." "A gift many of us could benefit from," the Reverend acknowledged. "I confess, Mrs. Oakley, I misjudged you." "We all did. We judge what we don't understand," Penelope replied without bitterness. "I've done the same." That evening, returning to the ranch with Henry, who had come to escort her home, Penelope felt a profound sense of accomplishment. "I'm proud of you," Henry said, his arm secure around her waist as their horses walked side by side. "Though not surprised, I always knew what you were capable of." "Because you saw me," Penelope replied. "Truly saw me when others only saw what was missing." 2 years into their marriage, as Penelope divided her time between teaching and homemaking, she placed Henry's hand on her abdomen one evening, her eyes shining with joyful tears. "Are you certain?" he asked, voice hushed with wonder. She nodded. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. By winter, we'll be 3. Henry gathered her in his arms, his joy too great for words, a feeling Penelope understood perfectly. As her body changed with the growing life inside her, Penelope found herself contemplating the child's future. Would he or she inherit her tendency toward silence? Would the world be kinder to a quiet child than it had been to her? "What are you thinking about?" Henry asked one evening as they sat by the fire, his hand gently caressing her rounded belly. "Whether our child will be like me," she admitted. "Whether they will struggle as I did." Henry considered this thoughtfully. "If our child is quiet like their mother, they'll have what you didn't, parents who understand that still waters run deep. And a world that's learning, slowly but surely, that there are many ways to have a voice." Their daughter, Margaret Martha Oakley, arrived during the first snowfall of December, her lusty cries belying the serenity that would become her hallmark. As she grew from infant to toddler, Margaret revealed herself to be observant and deliberate, quick to smile but selective with her words, a perfect blend of her parents' natures. By Margaret's 5th birthday, the Oakley family had expanded again with the addition of Thomas William, a boisterous contrast to his contemplative sister. The ranch had prospered under Henry's management, allowing them to build a larger home with a dedicated schoolroom where Penelope continued teaching while raising her children. Willow Creek, too, had grown, transforming from frontier outpost to respectable town. The railroad brought prosperity and new ideas, including greater acceptance of those who didn't fit conventional molds. Penelope, once ostracized for her quietness, now found herself respected as an educator and sought after for her thoughtful counsel. "Mrs. Peterson asked me to join the library committee," she told Henry one evening, amusement dancing in her eyes. "The same Mrs. Peterson who once warned mothers to keep their children away from me." Henry chuckled, pulling her into his lap despite her token protest. "People change when given reason to. You've given this town plenty of reasons." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Henry surprised Penelope with a celebration at the ranch, inviting friends, colleagues, and yes, even those townspeople who had once shunned her. "A decade ago, I made the best decision of my life," Henry announced, raising his glass to his blushing wife. "I found a woman who taught me that the spaces between words can hold as much meaning as the words themselves, who showed me that quiet is indeed the sound of peace." Penelope, still not entirely comfortable with being the center of attention, nevertheless stood and raised her own glass. The room fell silent, everyone knowing how rarely Mrs. Oakley made speeches. 10 years ago," she began, her voice soft but unwavering, "a kind cowboy offered shelter from a storm and changed my life forever. He saw strength where others saw strangeness, value where others saw void." She turned to Henry, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you for listening to my silence and hearing all the things I couldn't say." As the gathering continued around them, Henry drew Penelope into a quiet corner. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. "These have been the richest years a man could ask for." "And there are many more to come," she promised, her hand finding his as naturally as breathing. Later that night, as their guests departed and their children slept soundly upstairs, Penelope and Henry stood on their porch watching stars blanket the vast Montana sky. No words were needed in that perfect moment, just the comfortable silence of two souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed. Penelope Shaw, once shunned for being quiet, had found her voice and her place in the world. Not by changing who she was, but by finding those who valued her exactly as she was. And in Henry Oakley, the cowboy who recognized that quiet was indeed the sound of peace, she had found not just acceptance, but celebration of her true self, the greatest love story she could have imagined.